Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today on Masechtas Nazir Daf Yud Zayin, we're going to begin on the very top line with Esvei. So before we continue with the question, let's remind ourselves of this Mishnah. The Mishnah said, first of all, if a person is a Nazir and he's in the cemetery, so he said even if they're for 30 days, in Oilam and Minyan, it's not going to count. And on this, the Mefarish said, in oil lakach tehechalav oisa nazirus. That's not chal shekilav kishenitma because there's makabel who is tame and maybe carbon toma. Since it doesn't mean anything, so therefore, since it's not chal, so therefore he does not have to bring a carbon toma. You only bring a carbon toma if you are a nazir and then you became tame. And then it says, on the other hand, if you're yatzav nichnas, if let's say you left the cemetery and let's say you were sprinkled and you became pure and then you went back into the cemetery. So since you've already begun your actual Nazirus, at that point we say that he will have to bring a carbon tuma by becoming tame. And then the Mishnah said, Rabbi Lezer Omer lobo b'yom v'hayomim rishonim yiplu ashihu bo yomim rishonim. So on this, the Mefarish says, Kishihiz of Ishon of a Taval, that at the time when he immersed himself, Im Nichnas Enu Mevi Carbon Tuma. He does not bring a carbon ad Shiyavor Lav Beis Yomim B'Tahara. He at least has to have 2 days of purity. And then the Gemara brought down a Machlokas Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, Misha Nazar V'hu B'Veis HaKvarus, which seemingly is the same case of our Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan says that the Nazirus is Chal, and Reish Lakish says the Nazirus is not Chal. So look in the Mefarish, Diksavar Dehaiman de Mekabel Nazirus Bevesik Varus Mitla Talia V'Kaima. He says that the Nazirus is like hanging in the balance, and therefore that's the reason why it works. Avgav Deloy Hadar Amar Ani Kabel Alai Mashi Marti Kishiisi Oim Bevesik Varus. So even when, let's say, he leaves, so he doesn't need to actually say, I'm a kabul upon myself that which I did before. Basically what happens is that while he's in the basic varus, it's just being mitlatali, and then when he leaves, then it's chal. Reish Lakish says, no, it doesn't help at all. And in fact, it has to be that he actually makes a declaration, at least some type of recognition to what it was before. Otherwise, it's not going to be chal at all. And therefore, as we saw, the machlokas will be regarding being seifek hasar boyim, whether or not you're going to get malchus. So if you say it's chal, then you would get malchus. But if it's not chal, then you would not get malchus. And we concluded on the top of Yud Zayin Manalv, unless you were yoitz v'nichnas. So if you left and then came back, so then in that situation, since you became tahar, now the Nazirus did come upon you, according to all shitas, and therefore for that reason, you will become a Nazir, and therefore if you become Tameh, subsequently you'll have to bring a carbon Toma, and you would get Malchus. Esvei. So we're asked the following question. Ein bein Tameh shenazar when Nazir tahar shenitma. There's no difference between a Tameh, someone who's Tameh, who became a Nazir, says the Mefarish, basic varis v'nazar. Right? He was already Tameh, and then he decides to become a Nazir. When Nazir tahar, as opposed to someone who was a Nazir and who was always tahar, shenitba. So both of them are Tameh. The question is, were you Tameh first and then you made yourself a Nazir, or you were a Nazir and then you became Tameh? El Tameh shenazar, when it comes to someone who is Tameh, for example, in a basic varus, and then he makes himself into a Nazirus, Shvi Shelo Oilu Min. His 7th day counts. What does that mean? So the Mefarish says, Kivan de Taval, once you immerse, Babi Tahar, Mas Chilimnais Miboy B'Yoim. We can start counting from that day. If Yishenu maybe carbon. So you can start counting the Nazirus on the 7th day, since no carbon is being brought. Because, as we said in that situation, he was already Tameh before he became a Nazir. The Nazir Tahar, but if he was a Nazir Tahar, Shenitma, and Shvishal Oil Minyan, so that 7th day will not count, Rather, says the Mefarish, that Yom Shmini Shemevi lo Karbanosov. Even though he's Toivel, he will V'hutar Ad Yom Shmini Shemevi Karbanosov. He actually has to wait until the 8th day when he brings the carbon. And then, only then, do we say that he starts counting his main Nazirus. Now, if you want to tell me this case, if the person was Tameh in a basic virus and he became a Nazir, that we say that the 7th day is Chal and it's oil leminion, my oil min a minion. The question is, why, if you're going to say it's not Chal, so then why do we say it counts? So we look in Tosfos. So Tosfos says like this. Sheneder b'oiso tameh l'nazir tahar. There's no difference between a nazir tameh who made a neder b'odo tameh while he was tameh l'nazir tahar, as opposed to someone who's a nazir who is pure. She nitma el the nazir tameh shvio minyan. We said that if he was a nazir tameh, so the 7th day counts. He's a gimel. When he gets sprinkled on the 3rd, v'shana b'zayin, he gets sprinkled b'yom hashli shiv yom shvi yitar. So on the 7th day, v'tavel yom shvi, and then he immerses himself on the 7th day. L'minyan nazirus tahara, so that 7th day will count. L'fi she'en tzarich havi carbon b'ches al tumasai, because this person doesn't have to bring a carbon. Umiyad kishehiza v'shana v'tavel, once he gets sprinkled upon the 2nd time on the 7th day and immerses himself, roy lochel of nazirus la'altar, he can begin counting his nazirus. So unihi the boy herb shemesh, I understand you have to wait till sunset. Ve'ech yochel nazirus. The question is, how could nazirus be chal? So he says yesh loimer the tful yoim kalisha tumaseh, because a tful yoim who's just waiting for herb shemesh, his kedusha, his tumah is weak. V'lo ma'akev melochel nazirus alav. Even though he's a tful yoim, the Tosfos is saying the chiddush is that it's still okay that he's able to start on that day. Next Tosfos, however, when it comes to a nazir tahar and he becomes tameh, the 7th day doesn't count. L'minyan nazirus taharas of asacha hebi chatos oif also oif asham mishmini. He still has to bring all these karbanos, and therefore the loy chal and nazirus the tahara and yom ches. So says Tosfos, if you want to tell me that when a person is in a basic virus, so he's already tummy, and he makes himself into a nazir, that's not chal, why do we say that the 7th day counts? If he never was makabel nazirus, it's nothing, right? It wasn't chal anyway. So what does it mean that the 7th day counts? Nim timer velishni dehadar v'kibel kidishani le'el b'yoytz v'nichnas. So why don't we just answer the same thing, b'yoytz v'nichnas? So he left and came back, and therefore that's why he taka is able to become a nazir. Yeshlomer d'im kein habili asuyi ze boy lemehadav lindor. You should have said that you have to go and make another neder. You don't have to do it. Okay. So that's the question. The question is, what is it? It doesn't mean necessarily am I olam and a minion, but the way the Tosfos is framing it is, if it's not chal, so then what does it mean that all of a sudden you're starting to count your nazirus? So it was nothing. So Omer Mar Ravashi Mechal Kolim Pligi the Chayil. No. When it comes to this person who makes this ned of nazirus, everyone agrees that it is chal. Why? Says the Mefarish, the kivan de mishkachas tahara chayil mamela. So what ends up happening is it's mamela. He becomes tahar. There's no question rather that the nazirus is chal. Ki pligi malki. Question is, does he get malchus? Rabbi Yochanan savar kivan de chayil laki. Yeah, since it's chal, so of course he's going to get malchus. Reshachas savar lo laki v'chayil, which is kind of hard to understand, but Pashim Shah, even though it's chal, you won't get malchus. Says Tosfos, Ukashiyitar in sarach lakso lider benazir. Therefore, since it's chal, when you become tar, you don't need to make another decoration. The chayil of Nazirus Rishon, because the first one kicks in as soon as you've finished your process of the 7 days. So now I understand why the 7th day counts. Even though you're not yachsav kabel, it still works. The whole question, machlokas, is whether or not a person will get malchus. So Taisa says, according to the shita of Rabbi Yochanan, it makes sense. What's its chal? It's malchus. Reish Lakish says, afag of the chayil, even though it is chal l'shar mili, l'yayin, l'galachas, l'loki atuma, you still won't get malchus for that. Kivan demiyati rachman mikarbin tuma, since the pasuk basically excludes him from bringing a carbon, miyati mikol din tuma af malchus. So since he doesn't have to bring a carbon tuma, because he was tame before he made this declaration, so therefore Reish Lakish says that you also will not get malchus. So now we're saying that's the whole point of the machlokus in this situation, is whether you give malchus. So the question on Reish Lakish, Misha Nazar, Vahu Bevesek Varis, in the cemetery, there are 30 days, Ein Olam and a minion, so it doesn't count, and the Einu maybe carbon tuma. They don't bring a carbon tuma. So carbon tuma hu deloi maisi. It says you don't bring a carbon tuma. How milky lucky allow, but it's mashma from our Mishnah that you still get malchus. No, but din hu delisni einoik. The truth is you won't get malchus either. So why does the Mishnah mention that? No, mishum de kaboilu misni seifa. You have to nichnas olam and a minion. Who may be carbon tuma. So tani reish and it may be carbon tuma. So all it's doing is contrasting the seifa where you left and came back. So therefore, because you leaving, so therefore, in that situation, the Nazirus was chal. So therefore, because of that, you are going to be chayav a carbon tuma. Tashma. And again, when it says that he left, doesn't mean he just left for 5 minutes. If you look at again the top mafarish, it says shiyatzav v'hizav v'shushish v'hizav v'toiv v'chadar amar harini nazir v'chadar nichnas savik zarbayim. So it's talking about that you went through the whole Torah process, then you went back in. So since you were a Nazir, that's why there'll be a carbon tuma. But it's not, maybe you still taka, the din is you would not get malchus. Tashma, ein bein tamei shenazir, as we said above. There's no difference between a person who was tamei and a basic varis who made himself a nazir. When nazir tahir shenitma, el shetami shenazar shvi shaloi omen aminyan. The 7th day counts, and you can start counting from that time because he doesn't bring a carbon. But nazir tahir shenitma ein shvi shaloi omen aminyan. The 7th day doesn't count because he has to wait till the 8th day to bring carbonos, which is mashma hal malchus shavin. You get malchus in both situations. Kasher shlakish samalei lo. It's equal when it comes to the din of the cutting of the hair. That's what it means. That's what it means. It says the Mafarish Shneihim Galchin Biyom Shvi Shalhen, that both of them will cut the hair on their 7th. So one gets malchus and one doesn't get malchus. So then so shouldn't this be said? Why didn't we mention it as another distinction? So, but the kante kamayri, we're only talking about tikkunim, progress. However, in progress, bekalkule lo kamayri, doing wrong, it doesn't mention. It says the Mafarish, amos maschilin limnois ze mishvi v'ze mishmini. The only thing we want to mention is when do you start counting, which is a positive thing, the 7th or the 8th, of a kilkul deloikul kamayr. We don't want to mention about malchus, but possibly is, as Reish Lakish said, there is a distinction when it comes to malchus, that when it comes to a person who is a tami shenazar would not get malchus. Tashma, misha tamei ben nazir. So again, our case, let's say he's in the basic varus. Also, he's not allowed to cut his hair, lishtos yayin, or drink wine. So it says clearly that he does get malchus tiyofta. So this actually is a direct kasha on the sheet of Reish Lakish. Boy Rava, Nazir v'hu bebeis hakvaris. If you have a Nazir in a cemetery, Mahu, what's the din? Boy Shehil Malchus O lo. Does he need to tarry there? Does he need to be delaying there in order to be able to get Malchus? Says the Mefarish. Lilki ad delishi kadei shir hishtachave. It has to be there for a certain amount of time. Just like you need Shiyas that's brought down in Taisus in the Perik Beis and that the Shulas can be Mikdash Alo. Entering the Mikdash, if you go in for half a second, you're not going to be punished. So it's the same din when it's being in the cemetery. If it's that the Amrile, they said to him, Lo tinzor, do not become a Nazir, Lamule Shihia. So then why does he have, why would we say there should be any distinction? Right? It says Taisus, who oimid bevesek vars, he's in a cemetery, Lamule Shihia, Pshita the lucky, he'll get Malchus. Below she, even without waiting, the Nazir Tahar, my time the low boy Shihia. Why does a Nazir Tahar not require that he should be waiting, right? V'lo mishkachas leklal the boy Shihia. We don't find this notion they have to wait to become to be punished. Mishum dekum masrin be shel yitma. It's the whole notion that about getting hasra. Don't become tamei b'hu Nazir Tahar. Hachinami masrin be shel yiderbo, but Nazir b'hu oiver. Lucky. So it's the same thing. It's like we're telling him don't become a Nazir, and he does, and violates the shoe. He should get Malchus right away. Vlav hai kilav v'hai v'lav hai kilav she'in bo maisa b'ma shemekabel nazirus the lav sheish bo maisahu b'ma she'inu yotzim misham kishenadu b'nazir. So he points the question, l'chayra, it's a question, it's a lav shein bo maisa, you shouldn't get Malchus. So he says the lav sheish bo maisa, but masha'inu yoitza misham kishenod benazir. The fact is interesting, the fact that you don't leave, that falls under the category of like a lav sheish bo maisa, because it's an act, something which you could be doing, right? Your lack of movement is a lav sheish bo maisa, because you're supposed to be getting out before you declare yourself as a Nazir. So Nazir, my time, a little boy, she the komasule, because you warned him. So hachinami komasube. So again, the fact that he was warned should be reason enough that you should not require shihia, a delay, as we continue in San Beis. So in a normal situation, there's no question. But let's say he entered into the cemetery with some type of a box, and he made a neder while he was in this box, and this box protects him from becoming tamei at that point. And upara me'elav maziva, and someone removed the roof. Says the Mefarish, Me'achach b'chaver uparas maziva shutachtav shahayis ashedu me'al roishai. So he himself, even though he was in a cemetery, but he was inside of a box, so that protected him. So ki gamrina and shihia bebeis hakvaris. So when do we say ki gamrina and shihia bebeis hakvaris? Aval avroi lo. Do we say that when do we learn shihia is bifnim? It's only inside the cemetery, but not outside. It says the Mefarish ki gamir shihia. Let's say you're tamei in the Beis HaMikdash. So maybe it's only when we're dealing with like going inside the Beis HaMikdash, but going outside the Beis HaMikdash, and let's say we're dealing with as a basic varus, maybe it doesn't make any difference. You're still going to be chayiv. Maybe this whole din of having to be in there for a certain amount of time is only when it comes to Beis HaMikdash. Ki gamrin shehia bebeis HaMikdash av avroi lo odim lo shna, or maybe there is no difference. Teku. Okay, question 5. Be'ez oifen miboil negemar le'inyan nazir iboy shiel malchus. So it's not when he's just stam in the Beis HaKvaros, but rather we're talking about in a situation nichnas b'shem teva migdal par chaver oinso me'elav hamazeva, that someone else opens up the roof. That's when the question stands. Okay. Question TB 23. Or 2022. Let's see. Misha Nazir Huba Basic Varis. Im Loika Ad Shishoya Sham. Maybe I'll kach carbon tuma. Oh, I think we did this already. So Malchus was a machlokus, and carbon tuma, everyone says he doesn't bring. 23. Lagabi ma iboy b'gemara l'hashois din nazir b'basic varis l'tamid b'mikdash. So he said, if let's say you enter by force, we don't get Malchus el im kin shah kedei hishtachave kedin tameh hanitma b'mikdash. So it's the same idea. So if a person entered inside the mikdash, so he says yes, and it was like l'oinus. So to over here, when a person enters in with this like into a basket, TB 23, whether or not in that situation a person also there's a din shahiyah or perhaps not. So good question. TA 22. Tami shekibel nazirus mamai maschalimnos nazirusai. So if the tami mace, so this we had already. So in that situation, it's already on the 7th day. Okay, he starts counting already on the 7th. Nazir tar shenitma in shvi shel oyim and a minyan. We said a tami shen nazir shvi shel oyim and a minyan. That was TA 22. Okay. So let's now continue in the Gemara. So the Gemara says as follows. So Tegu, Boy Ravashi, Nazar Vahu Bevesik Varis. So again, the same situation. Person that makes himself a Nazirus in the cemetery. So the question is, Toin Giluach Halo. Does that person require Giluach? So in other words, on the 7th day. Ki boy Tigalachas. When do we require the cutting of the hair on the 7th day? Tar shenitma. If you were tar and you became tame, to come a tamlin izirase, because you came tame while you were a nazir. Avol tame shen nazir lo odil shna. So tashma mish nazir bevesik varis. If you're in the cemetery, a fil hayisham shlishim yom, there 30 days ain't no minyan. It doesn't count. The in maybe carbon toma. You don't bring carbon toma. Again, you have to do the 7 days, and then afterwards you would, we say it's chal, so on the 7th day you start counting. So carbon tumahu dulamaisi. You just don't bring a carbon, which is mashma of a giluach boy. So it's a raya. Then you still have to do giluach, which is what we said on Omanal. So Mer says no. Matam kaimer. Matam and maybe carbon tuma mishum duloboy giluchi. Maybe it's actually explaining the reason why you don't need to bring a carbon tuma is because there's no giluach either. So maybe it's pumfakert. Maybe it actually teaches the other way around. Tashma. Ein bein tame shenazar, lenazar tame, lenazar tahar shenitma, as we saw this before. El tame shenazar shvi shelo oyom and a minyan, because he doesn't bring a carbon. The nazar tahar shenitma ain't shvi shelo oyom and a minyan, because he does bring a carbon the 8th day. My lav ha liskalachas zavas hashavan. Which we said, maybe when it comes to malka, when it comes to shaving, is the same, that in fact you still do it. Lo, halo malka zavas hashavan. Again, not according to both shitas, but according to Rav Yochanan. El tegalachas mai zen megaleach v'zen megaleach. So listen. So why don't we mention it? So tani shvi shlo v'kol mili. It mentions shvi shlo, which we can understand. It's including all matters. Says the Mefarish. Dahachi mashmi shvi shlo oilam and a minyan. If yishenu maybe carbon, which don't bring a carbon. Umatam enu maybe carbon. If yishenu ten giluach tuma. You don't do giluach on tuma b'zayin. V'zein shvi shlo oilo if yishiyesh shlo. With galech b'shvi or hakrav carbon b'shmini. Oisa yoyim shemakrav carbon cholim nazirus. Okay, so again, we don't have an answer to this question yet. Tashma, ainli elime tumasai. I only know the yemei tumasai, the days of being tame, that they don't count. She'ein oil minyan. How do we know the day of Saras, that they don't count for Nazirus? V'dinhu. Yemei tumaso, during the days of Tuma, megaleach, maybe carbon. You do shave and then you bring a carbon. So af yemei chaluto megaleach, maybe carbon. Also, the day that of saras, maybe will also be megaleach and bring a carbon. Uma yemei tumaso, just like yemei tumaso ein olim and minyan, af yemei chaluto ein olim and minyan. So we're bringing this whole thing down to show that the proof that the din is that you are megalech. Lo. When it comes to the days of Toma, Shechin mevatel behen as a koidman, it will cancels the days you counted bitahar before. Lafikach ein lo min a minyan. Tarmi b'mechaluto shein mevatel as a koidman. However, when it comes to mechaluto, when it comes to saras, it's not going to cancel the days of Nazirus. So Amart, man Nazir bekever shisaru royalist galachas. When it comes to a Nazir bekever, in which a person is fit to cut in a minion, so you make chaluto shein royalist galachas was not fit to cut. Lo koshikain shein a minion. So my love te galachas toma. So it's talking about a situation. Again, we're bringing this proof that you're able to get a haircut. That's part of the process, even while you're tame. Even though you, again, let's say we're in the basic forest. Lo te galachas tahara. We're talking about only when it's tahara, not when it's tame. Hachinam stavra. As we continue to chesam and aleph, this is logical. These tagadat and galachas toma. So we're talking about times of toma. Yemei chaluto milu boy tegalachas. Would we not require tegalachas? Lo. Tegalachas the Nazirus katani. Maybe we're just talking about tegalachas of Nazirus, but not of saras. We'll stop here. Let's see if there's another question. Okay. Question 6. Matam shimecha lutai of saras. What's the reason why ein oilun lenazir min a minyan? It doesn't count. V'il yimei hesgero oilun. So this is actually straight from Taisus. So v'il Taisus al yimei hesgero devade oilun lo lafishin zokik legaleach kamo muchlat. They nechshav yimei tuma kamo muchlat. So the answer is lafishin hamusker zokik legaleach kamo muchlat. A musker does not cut their hair. A muchlat does of saras. So therefore, because of that, that's the reason why Yemei Chaluto is ein oilun in a minyan, because Yemei Chaluto is linked to being galeach. However, when it comes to Yemei Hiskiro, it is oilun because there is no mitzvah giluach when it comes to Yemei Hiskiro. Adkan.